This is Michael Popok. Look how dark it is. Look at the time. It must be legal AF after dark. Jack Smith's coming after Donald Trump in two distinct ways. One, brand new indictment coming out of a grand jury that's been around since 2023. What's that all about? And does this new indictment fix all the problems identified by the United States Supreme Court to put the DC election interference case back on track? And while you're at it, how do you get the case back on track in an efficient way? Jack Smith has told Judge Chutkan how she should do it and get it done in the next 60 to 90 days. Donald Trump wants to put everything off until 2025 or beyond. How about never? Never would be good for Donald Trump. We break down all these major developments that are rocking Donald Trump's world. One place on the dial, one place in YouTube-verse. Legal AF. Take a listen.
Hey, Michael Popok, let's get right into this superseding indictment. Everybody will recall that Donald Trump was indicted in the Washington, D.C. criminal case. The original indictment was back in August of 2023. Right now, we are in August of 2024. Donald Trump filed that motion to dismiss on the grounds of absolute presidential immunity, which was rejected by federal judge Tanya Chutkan back in 2023. She denied it, said, you can't be above the law. Then Donald Trump appealed it to the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, a three-judge panel made up of Democrat and Republican appointees, and they said, you're not above the law. What a ridiculous concept. There are no kings in the United States of America. What? Then Donald Trump appealed it to the United States Supreme Court, and they said, yes, of course there are kings. We are conservative, meaning we want to conserve the monarchy. We're going to create a doctrine for you, Donald, because you appointed us. And we're going to call it absolute presidential immunity, where if there are core constitutional functions, official acts, which needs to get a broad presumption that everything you do is in office, even if you order your DOJ to do things which they're supposed to be complete independence, well, that gets immunity also. And we're going to give you, you're not even asking for it, but why don't we give you evidentiary immunity as well? So even evidence of official acts and core constitutional functions can't be introduced if you are criminally charged. Here you go, Donald. So that's what the Supreme Court did. They remanded the case back to the district court, meaning they sent it back to the district court for further proceedings. Judge Tanya Chutkan is like, what's up, Jack? What are you going to do now? I don't know why the Supreme Court did this, but they're right-wing. The judge didn't say this word for word. I'm giving a little bit of color to it. The judge was like, well, what are you going to do now, Jack? The Supreme Court apparently says that there are kings now in these types of circumstances. Jack Smith's like, I need a little bit of time, Judge Tanya Chutkan. Give me a few weeks. During that few weeks, Special Counsel Jack Smith impaneled a new grand jury in Washington, D.C., and he basically reframed with tweaks surgically, right? He went in there, very surgical, and then Jack Smith said, all right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to refer to Donald Trump as candidate Trump, as citizen Trump. We're going to remove an allegation here or there that references Donald Trump's communications with Jeff Clark at the DOJ. But otherwise, we're going to make this clear a la the civil case. Remember that Blassingame case that we would talk about here, which basically said that Donald Trump doesn't have civil immunity because he was campaigning. He was candidate Trump and citizen Trump. I think Jack Smith kind of borrowed that language, interposed. You know how Donald Trump likes to use the word interpose? Jack Smith interposed it. And then he basically kept all of the charges, though, that were in the original indictment, including the 1512C2 charge, obstruction of official proceeding, which is notable because the Supreme Court there also said, hey, insurrectionists, we got your back. We got your back, insurrectionists. Even though 1512C2 says that it's a criminal offense if you obstruct official proceedings, we're going to interpret subsection A as encompassing subsection B as well. And what we're going to say is it has to be involving the kind of manipulation, distortion, tearing, ripping, shredding of documents. And so if an insurrectionist didn't have their design aimed at documents, then we're going to dismiss those cases. But then you had you had Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. She did kind of give a little bit of a roadmap, though, to Special Counsel Jack Smith, where she was like, but, if it's like things like electoral certificates, those are still documents, so you could still potentially bring it. Jack Smith latched on to that. Popok, that's my analysis. How do you think that this new indictment, the superseding, which is like an amendment, right? Same judge, same court, same case. One could think of it as like an amendment, but it supersedes the other. New grand jury. So Trump got indicted by another grand jury. Same case, same judge. Break it down, Popok. And Popok, while you're at it, after breaking that down, break the streamlined scheduling order down as well.
Yeah, in fact, I'm going to start with the streamlined scheduling order in its observation about the superseding indictment to sort of wrap it all together. You got it all right there. Let me just give my color and my commentary about some of the things I think are really interesting about what you laid out. New grand jury, meaning in a gangster move, which we love, just shows you the sophistication of the tactician and strategist that is Jack Smith. We thought he needed 3 weeks to kind of figure out how to take the immunity decision, clear it through the Department of Justice and all of its heads, and then give his position and how to brief it to the Judge Chutkan. And that's why we pushed off this status report until Friday for about 3 weeks. That's not what he was doing. He made a decision that rather than try to salvage the original indictment and kind of make Swiss cheese out of it with like redactions and blue pencil, a thing that we call it in the law, where you sort of, just leave out paragraphs 13, 26, 19, 29, and 908, and then we'll be fine, Judge. Rather than do that, he went through the methodical process of going back to an existing grand jury that was already impaneled since 2023. It's known as 2023-8 grand jury. And they were doing a lot of things. They were indicting Jan 6 insurrectionists. They were indicting the guy that carjacked Justice Sotomayor, all sorts of things. They were like, hey, let's make a full presentation of all the evidence that we need. Totally under the radar. Mainstream news didn't report on it. We didn't get wind of it, that there was a grand jury up and running and maybe re-indicting Donald Trump, and boom, out comes the superseding indictment. And it's just, like you used to joke a lot on, and I loved on the MeidasTouch Network about Jack Smith with his Subway sandwich from Subway, and his lunch pail and his thermos going to work. That's what he did here. He just went and got a superseding indictment like it was no big deal, and comes out with it, and then boom, delivers it and drops it on everybody's desks, including yours and mine. But more importantly, Donald Trump's rocks his world, changes the weather in his world. Boom, you're shooting at the wrong indictment. Here's a superseding indictment. And what I love about the superseding indictment, and let me read from the status report, joint status report. I mean, it's joint in the sense that two people signed it, but it's certainly, they're not in agreement. And you and I'll talk about it in the next segment. I'll pick up on it, about how to move this case forward on the issues that you presented. But what they said about the new indictment is, and this is in the first bullet point on page 2, the government's proposed brief about how to resolve this issue would provide the defendant and the court with detailed information regarding the content, form, and context of the defendant's conduct, distinguish his private electioneering activity from official action, hold on to that thought, and rebut the presumption of immunity as to any conduct that the court may deem official. In other words, they have taken in the superseding indictment, they have shot it through with references to make it clear that Donald Trump was acting in a private electioneering campaigner-in-chief capacity, not under his official presidential conduct or capacity, even stretched to its outer boundaries, nor core constitutional conduct, meaning the things that are actually listed in the Constitution for a president to do under Article 2, and falls instead into this. He's just trying to get elected. The electioneering, right? Reducing this. What we noticed in the campaign and with Jack Smith, this is all about shrinking Donald Trump down to size, right? Make him so small you can just put him in a little bathtub and leave him there. And that's what they're doing. It's like, you're just a 2-bit electioneer. You're just a small man who's trying to hold on and cling to his job. That is not covered. And what they're saying to the court, talk about it next, is we've taken the indictment, the new indictment, and we've made it about private conduct, private attorneys, all the co-conspirators, unindicted co-conspirators, Boris Epstein, John Eastman, Ken Chesborough, Rudy Giuliani, all of them are now private lawyer, private lawyer, private lawyer, private lawyer, right? And because it shows that Donald Trump did two things at one time. He arguably did some presidential things that would have some level of immunity, but he did a lot of things like moonlighting off the clock that were not presidential at all. And I don't mean that in the way that Michelle Obama meant it, that he's not very presidential. I meant it ain't presidential conduct, and therefore it's not cloaked with any type of immunity, let alone any kind of presidential immunity. And they're telling the judge, we'll get there next, that they're up to the task to show her why even the things that look on the veneer, on the surface of being presidential official conduct, we're going to rebut that presumption and show you why that should be stripped away of any immunity as well. The biggest takeaway for me, and if you want to reduce the superseding to its essence, it's that it is amplified and beefed up references to the private conduct of Donald Trump through private actors and private co-conspirators to achieve a private, meaning non-immune, prosecutable offense and conduct. That's one. Two, it has removed Jeff Clark, who was the erstwhile number 5 in the Department of Justice, who got elevated to acting attorney general in the last 5 days by Donald Trump as he weaponized the Department of Justice. Unfortunately, as murky and unclear and unhelpful as most of the Trump versus U.S. immunity decision is by the United States Supreme Court, the only thing they said clearly that we could all figure out is that Jeff Clark needs to be dropped from the indictment. At least this indictment and Donald Trump's interactions with him dropped from the indictment, because they found that interaction and called it out by name was absolute immune under their interpretation of core presidential function. So he had to come out. So they literally just dropped, they kept the numbering system the same on the unindicted co-conspirators. They just removed one guy, Jeff Clark. Now, a side note, Jeff Clark ran off to the bar of DC, who's trying to take his law license away, and said, see, I'm not indicted. I'm not mentioned in the indictment anymore. And they're like, everybody else's reaction was like, that doesn't mean your conduct wasn't unethical. Not every unethical conduct that you lose your bar license for is a crime. That's not how that works. They commit crimes. It is unethical. But we'll leave that for another day and another hot take. So that's the boil down. And they kept and they leaned into the special counsel all 4 counts. The interference, obstruction with an official proceeding counts, which is really the fake elector certificates as it's framed, and the 2 counts related for theft of government services or obstruction of fraud against the United States, or however it's framed. And I love that too, because they're not walking away from it. And you're right, it was both Ketanji Brown Jackson, but more importantly, in the majority decision, even Trump versus U.S., as terrible as that decision was as a license to Donald Trump to do bad things, even on page 8, which I'll never forget, of that opinion, it quotes then Judge Sotomayor when she was on the Second Circuit Court of Appeals before she was elevated to the U.S. Supreme, in her analysis about that provision, saying if you're cranking out fake evidence and fabricating fake documents, that could be obstruction of an official proceeding. And so they lean into that because they know this is going to go through Chutkan first, but then DC Court of Appeals, and then United States Supreme Court. So the ultimate audience for this superseding indictment is the U.S. Supreme Court, but also giving Judge Chutkan the tools and the toolbox that she needs to do her job. Let's talk about her job as I segue into, and then I'll turn it back to you, Ben. I'll do it. We'll reverse it. So there was this joint status report that had to be filed. And even though it's only 10 pages, one of the shortest documents you and me are going to talk about today, it is powerful in how the two sides see the world. And I'll give you my opinion before I turn it over to you as to which side I think is going to prevail. What Jack Smith is telling the judge is that we've heard from the other side, Trump's lawyers, they want to file all sorts of motions against the superseding indictment. Because my other takeaway for the superseding indictment is that it is essentially about the same in terms of the allegations. It's still Wisconsin interference and Pennsylvania interference and Michigan interference and the pressure campaign on Mike Pence and the use of fake certificates. It's essentially the same. It doesn't mean that Donald Trump doesn't have the right to shoot at the new indictment and try to get it dismissed. He does. But it is essentially the same, and the defendant has always been on notice, which is what's important in due process, as to what the crimes are he's being charged with. So I don't think so. So in terms of scheduling, Jack Smith says the other side's going to file all sorts of motions. We'll let them tell you what we think they're going to be, and they're going to be what we thought. They're going to be. Jack Smith is a figment of our imagination. He's illegitimate. Special counsels don't exist. They're not properly appointed, and they're not properly funded. Because Trump's taking the position that two major issues have to be decided before this case can even go any further. One, immunity, because that's what the Supreme Court said. And two, that guy over there, he's not even a prosecutor. We shouldn't even be here. See that what Judge Cannon did in Mar-a-Lago. See the dissent or the concurrence by Clarence Thomas. Okay. She's the only judge in the history of the federal judiciary practice and jurisprudence that's ever ruled this way, and it violates a 1974 Supreme Court decision, but let's try it again. That's one. Jack Smith says, and this is a little unorthodox, but I like it, and I think this is the way the judge is going to go. He says, Judge, let us go first. Even though it's our indictment, and usually a motion to dismiss the indictment on the defense side goes first, let us go first. We'll give you a brief. We'll tell you why this indictment perfectly matches and comports with the United States Supreme Court decision on immunity in every way, shape, and form. Then give them a brief, Trump's side a brief. Then you'll give us a brief. And at the very same time, to save time, have them brief and file all their motions about everything under the sun, and we can do it all in parallel. One big omnibus kind of hearing, maybe a month or two from now. We won't tell you when to hold it. You hold it when you're ready, but let's do it all at the same time. Rather than sequentially, which is what Donald Trump wants. He wants to have him being the only and last word on any issue before the election under their order proposal. Their pretrial proposal would be Trump's. Then we'll fully brief immunity, and then if that survives, then we'll fully brief the special prosecutor is real or not, and then if that's still around, then we'll do other motion practice, and maybe at the end of 2025, Judge, we'll be done with briefing, and then appeals, and then 2026, and they're like, no. So here's my view, Ben. I'll kick it back to you. My view is that the judge is going to say, I sort of agree more with the special prosecutor than with Mr. Trump. I'm going to set a compact briefing schedule. It's going to be like in a couple of weeks. You guys seem to all be ready with your motions. You filed similar motions other places. Okay, I want the prosecutor's brief in 2 weeks. I want Trump's opposition brief on immunity after that. And to solve this balance issue or this sort of unique issue, I'm going to even give another brief if I think I need it to the Trump side if they think they need it. But that'll balance everything out. And bring all your motions at the same time. And let's have everything in by October, whatever. And then we'll have a hearing, and then I'll give you my ruling. And the loser can go do what they're going to do at the appellate court sometime in October, November, December, or whatever it's going to be. I don't think, knowing that everybody's waiting to appeal, and I mean Trump, she's not going to stretch this thing out to 2025 and beyond, knowing that she's got to, the quicker she makes a ruling, the quicker we're going to get definitive rulings from the Supreme Court ultimately in this case. That's my view of it. I think Trump gets rejected on his attempt to delay, and it's going to be closer to what the prosecutor has proposed.
Yeah, I think you're going to have a ruling by Judge Tanya Chutkin on the immunity question in 2024. I think we're probably likely to have it October or November. I agree. I think there'll be an expedited briefing schedule precisely because that's actually what the Supreme Court requested, right? That these issues of absolute immunity, according to the Supreme Court, are so important. They're like threshold issues, right? So if they're threshold issues, then why in Donald Trump's scheduling order, other than if he's trying to delay, does he not address them as the threshold issue, right? If ultimately you believe you're entitled to absolute immunity, Michael Popok, you would be like, just if you were criminally charged and you believe that you have immunity, you would want to run in tomorrow with your get out of jail free card. Immune, Hello, I got immunity. You wouldn't want to go, you know what? Let's keep this thing going till 2025. Yeah, it just shows the games that are being played right there. I think Judge Chutkan sees through it.
Welcome back. We created a podcast 4.5 years ago for these trying times to make sense of them. And we called it Legal AF for a reason, and now you know why. Join us on Wednesdays and Saturdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Time for live recordings on this YouTube channel and then on audio podcast platforms of your choice. We curate the top 3 or 4 stories at the intersection of law and politics. We bring it to you just the way we just did, unfiltered, with great deep analysis in a way that I don't believe exists anywhere else. Not our unique brand. We are uncensored. We're unfiltered. We're unplugged. Sometimes we're unhinged. And we're doing it all in the defense of democracy. So if you like it and you already know about Legal AF, thank you for being part of our audience. We're growing organically. This network has grown to 3 million. And Legal AF, I think, has got a lot to do with that and its audience. And so if you know all about us, thank you. If you don't know about us, that's an invitation right there. Join us Wednesdays, Saturdays, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and everywhere you get your audio podcast. Just plug in Legal AF. That's all you got to do. That's what we look like. There it is. And if you know about us and you want to help us grow by word of mouth, send this clip, this After Dark, off to friends and family and ask them to join us. So until my next hot take, until my next Legal AF, this is Michael Popok reporting. Heary, heary, Legal AF Law Breakdown is now in session. Go beyond the headlines and get a deep dive into the important legal concepts you need to know and we discuss every day on Legal AF. Exclusive content you won't find anywhere else, all for the price of a couple of cups of coffee. Join us at patreon.com/legalaf. That's patreon.com/legalaf.